But just circle what category you fall into. Media, treating you just like community because you have a say also. Then after we get a crowd in here, I will go ahead and we'll have a little chat. I want to explain to you about the process, tell you who I am, what my background is, etc. And then at the end, I'll give anyone an opportunity to say anything they want to about the process or about what they're looking for in a superintendent that they did not get an opportunity to write on here. If you would like to, on the back of this, put the name of someone you would like me to tap, to look at as a possible candidate for this position, do that. If there's somebody, and I know this does not sound very nice, but on the back, if there's somebody who you just don't think needs to be in the position of superintendent, put it on there. These are confidential. Before you leave today, you will put them in this envelope, right, or in this folder right here. And then I'll explain to you a little bit later how these are analyzed, how the data from these are analyzed, all right? And there are pencils and pens up here. If you, and you don't have to write complete sentences. I am not grading these for complete sentences. Bullets are fine, just so you get down your thoughts.
Online survey?
Some of them are. Now, it is an opportunity. We have multiple instruments that we're using to collect data. So on this, I would encourage you to put anything that you've not already responded. If you've done the online survey, you don't need to duplicate what you put on there. So anything above and beyond that was on the survey, these are open-ended. Some of these are open, well, this is open-ended. And so you will respond here anything that you've not already said on the other survey, okay?
How long will the survey be open?
Until the 6th.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's at 4 p.m. I'd have to look, or midnight. I'm not exactly sure. If you need a pen or pencil, take a
But
pen
I'm
or
sure I can do it
pencil.
from mine.
I did it on the
And
computer.
if you want to
Yeah,
put your
that's
chair up to the
what I
table, if you need something hard to write on, that's fine also.
Yeah.
And I'm going to run get a tissue, and I'll be right back. Keep you any longer than what you need to be here. I'll go ahead and begin, and feel free to finish writing if you'd like. I'd like to tell you who I am, first of all. My name is Kendi Behrens. I am a 35-year veteran educator. The last 9.5 I served as superintendent up in Florence, Alabama, way up in the northwest corner, and that's where my husband and I still live. As a part-time job, even though I'm retired as a superintendent, as a part-time job, I do consulting work for the Alabama Association of School Boards. And I was asked to conduct this search and to serve as a facilitator. And I want to, you know, the word consultant has such negative connotation. But I want to make it clear right from the beginning that we, our organization, the School Board Association, does not select your new superintendent. That is the board's responsibility. However, we do facilitate the process. We do collect applications. We do recruit. And then we do narrow down to a pool of, in the contract that says up to 5. Sometimes we'll turn over 7 names to a district. It just depends on what the circumstances are, who has applied. We are far more concerned about the quality of the pool than we are the quantity of the pool. And when I say we, I have 3 colleagues who are in this business with me. 2 are retired superintendents as well. 1 has been a superintendent in 2 states. And then the 4th person on our team was an associate dean at a university in our state. And he now has a consulting business in education. He has conducted many, many of the superintendent evaluations throughout the state. Teachers go through evaluation, superintendents are evaluated as well. He's very familiar with many, many people in the state. Do we have someone in mind as your next superintendent at this point? No. We go into these with an open book, open slate. But we are very aware, I in particular, and I'll be sharing this with my colleagues when we go to Montgomery to screen, very aware of the high standard that you have here, and I applaud you for that. And really, this is one of the largest community groups I've ever had in the morning, and I think I've done 14 of these searches in the state. Yeah, so I applaud you because I sense the involvement here. And of course, Hoover has such a great reputation throughout the state and has had, and I know you want to stay on that trajectory and to take your district even further than it's been in the past. So thank you for being here and taking time out of your schedule and for caring about your school district. You know, as the leader goes, so goes the whole district, and that's why it's so important that we work with you to find the very best leader. And that's one reason you're here today, is to give input. And I know that many of you probably have been online and you have completed the online survey. That is just one snippet of data. The data are all triangulated, meaning that we do some qualitative data. We do the quantitative that New South is doing online. We take what we hear people say in these meetings. I will be analyzing the data from the papers that are submitted today from the various groups. I'll be looking for common patterns and themes. And those common patterns and themes that are the most often recurring are the ones that will be part of the report that I will be back here on the 10th. I believe it's the 10th, yes, to share what I've gathered from the board, what has been gathered from quantitatively from the online survey, and what I gathered from analyzed from the qualitative data from these papers. So I just want you to know that we come at this from various angles to try to get, and what we're trying to do is to get a picture of what you're looking for, where you want to go, what you perceive the challenges to be in this district. And that's what the board wants to see also. Now, how do we use all this information? Well, first of all, when we're screening down in Montgomery, my colleagues and I, we will have this final report in front of us. And so if you're telling us you need someone or your district is going this direction, we need to find somebody who has experience, who can take you in this direction. Somebody, if technology is very, very important in your district and you're among the top in the state in terms of technology in schools, we want to put in that top pool of 5, or how many ever, a minimum of 5. We want to get people in that pool who are not afraid of technology, not somebody who doesn't know how to log in to do this or that. So we're using this information to find the best matches when we screen to come up with that pool. So this is one phase of the process. Now, you probably have seen the timeline, mine which is all marked up, but there was a timeline that was agreed upon between your board and the School Board Association. The stakeholder meetings, of course, are taking place today. I'll be back on the 10th, as I mentioned, to deliver the results to the board. The advertisement will be going out around the 17th. And on the 10th, the board will also be discussing what is going to be in that posting. There's some standard language that we're required to put in a posting, and then there are some details specific to your district that will go out in the posting. You see, not only are you looking for a superintendent, but there are candidates out there who are going to be studying you as much as you'll be studying them once those 5 names are released. So it is definitely a two-way street. It's a good time to conduct a search because people who are in this business, this is the time of year when they will start looking for jobs. Mid-year, it's very difficult to replace. It's more challenging to replace a superintendent. The timing of the search is good. This is a very appealing area, I feel like, and it is a national search. We will cast the net broadly. In the past, most of our candidates come from the Southeast in the other searches I've conducted. Some from Alabama, but honestly, sometimes we have more from outside of state than we do in state. Occasionally, we'll get people who will apply from up north. One time we had a lady from Australia, but she had connections to the district where I was conducting a search. So we never know, who's going to apply. But we also start, once the posting's out there, it'll get real quiet. You won't hear anything. And I told the board this when I met with them individually the other day to find out what they're looking for in a superintendent. I said, once the posting goes out, there'll be a long lull of just quietness. But that's when we're doing our work. That's when we're looking for some of the best and brightest out there who have an interest in moving, et cetera. And that's when people are applying online and when we're looking at applications, et cetera. So there will be a quiet time, and just know that's normal. Now, when I come back and I share the 5 names, I can promise you, it'll probably be in this room, I can promise you people start Googling right away and checking out who these people are. Boy, those thumbs just start flying. And there's all kinds of yeah that goes on after that. Oh, I know him, or my cousin lives there, or whatever. And we're glad because we do vetting before we bring those 5 names. We do vetting. We have different ways of going about this. But we also encourage the entire community, all the employees, whoever's involved or interested, we encourage you to do vetting also. If you have a cousin that lives in the town where this candidate is, you know, pick your cousin's brain about this person. We want all the help. We want to know all we can about this person before a person is hired. The board, it may end up that the board will narrow the candidates down to 2, and then they'll go visit their communities and talk to people on the street and ask, you know, what do you think about this person? What reputation do they have? Where have they taken this district, et cetera. So this process will unfold. It's a very systematic process. If the process is allowed to work, there will be 1 person left at the end who will be your new leader. I think your board, from what I understand, is a very functioning board, and I believe they all have in their hearts and minds that they're going to allow the process to work. And so we just take it 1 step at a time. So I've told you a little bit about me. I've told you a little bit about the process. I do have more dates here. I won't bore you with reading all of them about when I come back and deliver the finals to the board, et cetera. But what I want to know from you is, do you have any questions about the process? Any questions about my involvement in the process, of what I do in any more detail than what I've explained? Is there anything that you want to say that you have not had an opportunity to either enter into the online survey, which is open through the 6th, from what I understand, or anything that you've not had an opportunity to write? And for those of you who just came in, you'll get one of these papers. You can write on there anything that you'd like to me. The board does not see these papers. I look for trends and themes, common trends and themes that come out today. But anything else that you've not had an opportunity to already put down that you would like to ask me? Yes, ma'am.
Just one second reference, what's the process for that work? Could you expand upon that? Have there been cases where the process is not been allowed to work?
You know what? Yeah. And it wasn't pretty. And I won't name districts, but these were 2, well, the one that stands out, the one that really stands out in my mind was one of the very first ones I did. It was in rural South Alabama, and the process was unfolding as it should, and kind of like the universe unfolding as it should. And then a city council person decided to tell the board president that somebody should be considered who was not in the top 5, who did not make our top 5 cut. And somehow this city council person had a great deal of weight and swayed another board member, and then those 2 board members, anyway, it got nasty. It was a divided vote. The new superintendent, it was a split vote for this new superintendent, who happened to be somebody who wasn't in our top 5. And at that point, we backed out of that search because we had given the names of the people who we felt like could best lead that district, and then it just wasn't real pretty from then on. So that was a case of the process not being allowed to work. And that's what I encourage everyone to allow that to happen. This is a very transparent process. The board's discussions will be out in public. The work that I do, I cannot release names to you of the people who have applied except the top 5. That is in the contract. And I'll tell you why that is. When a sitting superintendent or assistant superintendent, whoever applies, these people have a lot to risk when they apply for a job back at home. They do not want to burn any bridges unless they know they're in the top 5 And of course, then they tell their board and whoever they need to back at home. Because once we give those 5 names out, that's public information, and they know they're in a fishbowl for this job. So we have made it from the beginning a practice that we do not tell you who has applied except the ones who make the top 5, and that is to protect the candidates. Otherwise, I just don't think people would ever apply for these jobs, to tell you the truth. That is an example, back to your question, as to the process not being allowed to work. Yes, ma'am.
So, in speaking of the city council, what role does our city council have in this process, and who ultimately will choose the candidate from the 5 candidates to choose the one who they would like? Is it our school board? Does the city council have a say? How does that work?
Okay, all of you will have a say. Those five interviews will more than likely be posted on, if you can't come, they're public interviews. All these interviews are done out in the open, of course. And they probably will be video. That's what we encourage, and that they be put on the school website. So if you're home and you can't make it, you can still watch all 5 interviews. And then we encourage people to give feedback to the board members. They will tell you how they want to receive that feedback. Generally, it's by email. There might be 2 of them receiving the emails. And that information is shared with the board. No board likes to be out on a limb all by themselves when it comes to a decision this huge. So they will be wanting your feedback. The city council will play a role just like you as community people, other community people do. A city council person can email the board members and say, I think this person looks really strong, sounds like a good match, or these 2 would be my favorite after hearing the interviews. But ultimately, by law, the final decision rests with the board after they have taken in the information from anyone who wants to give them information. So by law, they will be the ones to vote. A city council person, a mayor, the pet store owner, grocery, somebody working at the grocery store, anyone can provide their feedback to the board members, but it is their responsibility to make the decision, if that helps. Yes, sir.
Now, you will be meeting with public officials later today, isn't that correct?
Yes, I have, and I've received notices from a couple who will be unavailable, and so we're going to have a phone conversation later. So yes, public officials will have an input, but ultimately the final decision will rest with the board. Does that help?
You mentioned something about maybe the qualifications the board was looking for. I mean, can you share those with us?
Sure. Well, I'll share the conversation I have with all the boards when we're conducting a search. They need to decide whether it's going to be a doctorate required or doctorate preferred. Generally, districts put doctorate preferred. Because I tell boards to give themselves some wiggle room, because you never know who's going to appear, and then you don't want to have yourselves backed into a corner. Also, the board will make a decision as to whether or not the superintendent needs to live in the district. Generally, that's a requirement, but I have worked with some boards. There was a board I worked with recently. There was a lake nearby, and many of the homes were around the lake, but it wasn't quite in the district, so they said then just in the general area. But in your situation, the board will decide if the superintendent must live in in Hoover city limits. And then generally there's a clause on there about where the children must go to school, because we as public educators generally don't appreciate, I know when I was superintendent in Florence, I don't think my board would have appreciated if my children were going to private school at the time that I was a superintendent of public school. Kids all came through public school, so it wasn't a problem. But so decisions made about that. But again, qualifications, oftentimes it'll say, unless there are extenuating circumstances, if someone came in and their child was blind or deaf, they might want them to go to Talladega. So again, you don't want to back yourself into a corner. They will put a salary, either a base salary or a salary range. They'll decide on the 10th. These are the decisions they'll be talking about on the 10th. I'll just tell you ahead of time. They'll be talking about, deciding on a salary, and how they decide that. We've sent them data from across the state and across the nation about superintendent salaries, compensation packages, etc. So they would have this data to look at to make an informed decision. Other postings, there are minimum requirements that the state requires in terms of, and please don't quote me on this, I have to pull it, but so many years in education, you have to have a certain endorsement or certification, I forget that it's called now, in leadership in our state. There are extenuating circumstances, again, exceptions for every rule in life anymore, it seems like. But there are some districts where they brought in people, say, a military former general or whatever, to be the leader of the district, and those have required some special state permissions to do those. But those are the kind of basics that will be on there. It won't be a real lengthy posting, but it'll meet the state minimum standards. I try to get as many specifics up front, like where they must live, children go to school, etc., because I don't want any candidate to feel tricked and find out when it's time to sign that contract, oh, you mean my kids have to go to school? And, where I'm superintendent, my kids always went to private Christian school, whatever. So I don't want them to have any surprises, excuse me, just like I don't want your board to have any surprises. We try to be very upfront about all of it.
Yeah, I guess to follow up on that, and maybe this is part of what your meeting with them gets at, I was thinking like, do they give any guidance on what type of skill set, or has the person been a superintendent before, would they prefer that or not, or if they've been a superintendent before, do they want someone from a similar size or larger district, that kind of
Right, some districts do go to that level and some do not. Now, there's a brochure that will be coming out that's being worked on now, a brochure about your district, and it goes out with a posting. It gives highlights of your district. It also goes into specifics about what your district is looking for. And that will be, and Jason's not in here right now, but Jason will be working with the School Board Association and the board president on what goes into that brochure. That gives a little bit more information about what they're looking for. Sometimes right on the posting they will say superintendent experience preferred. Again, they don't say required. A lot of times it gets into semantics, and I guess I've worked as a superintendent with attorneys so much that you really pick it down to little words. But I'm going to use an example. Cobb County and Gwinnett County, right around Atlanta, okay, huge metropolitan areas. They have assistant superintendents who are in charge of more students and more schools than most superintendents in Alabama. So if you said superintendent, former superintendent experience required, you could have an outstanding assistant superintendent apply. They don't have that title, but they've been in charge of more than what a superintendent, many superintendents have in our state. So that's why we're very careful with the language that goes up there. But the brochure will be read very carefully by the candidates to help them decide if they're a match or not. And there probably will be some more discussion about those types of things on the 10th as well. But watch for the brochure, because it will be out there. We'll have some pictures of highlights of your district, and it's just a little trifold front and back brochure. Yes, sir.
So is there any information relative to the candidate's prior performance, and I guess in other words, academics, success, financial success in leadership roles and previous leadership roles? Is that ever factored into there, or is that part of the interview process?
Well, we factor it in when we are doing our screening. Oftentimes, there will be data that will be submitted to us, like a portfolio with the superintendent, and we will be looking at that as screeners. But in addition, it will be something that your board will be factoring in as well. And that brings me to the point of contacting references. You know, when you fill out an application, you always put down, folks who you really think are going to give you these really great recommendations. We go beyond that. We may contact those people, but we contact a lot of other people in our preliminary vetting. We contact a lot of other people who aren't on our list, because sometimes we get a more honest view of people outside of that. So those types of things are factored in along the way. It's at different points. We just can't check people out too carefully if we don't know them. And there'll be a lot of people who will apply, I'm sure, who we, sitting around that table, former superintendents, do not know, especially if they come in from out of state. So we have to be very clever about calling their state associations, similar to Alabama Association of School Boards. We'll call their school board association, talk to people who work with these gals and guys. The Superintendent's Association in their state, if it's out of state, talk to people. We may call, we have to be careful before they're named the top 5, who we do call, because we don't want to get them in any trouble with their board, but it's tricky. But again, the vetting goes on way up until the time they sign the contract. There will still be checking going on these people. Yeah.
Yeah, I have more of I guess a concern rather than a question.
Okay.
First of all, is your company the company that did the survey, or is that a different?
No, that's a different company.
It's a pretty poor survey, in that I feel like it leaves off some pretty important things. It certainly leaves off opportunities for the community to provide feedback for things that we see fit.
Mm-hmm.
There's no. I could have gotten a college kid to come up with a better survey on SurveyMonkey. But I think one of the largest things for me, and it sounds like everyone has some really great questions, but for me personally, the lack of attention to fine arts. In particular, you asked the question on the survey, how important is athletics? And it is, and it's very important. I think this community, that's something we do really, really well. Meanwhile, we have students at Hoover and Spain Park that have no performing arts center. We have great thespians. We have great choir. I mean, the art scene is fantastic, and we're not doing anything as a community to help these kids out.
To support that.
Sure, absolutely. And
I'd echo that, because my
Yeah.
daughter, in both the 2 middle schools on this side of town, were at a competition Friday night, and they finished first and second. And they had no alternative,
Well-
or
A
not a lot of
those children
alternatives.
are going to go to
Yeah.
Shades Valley
sure.
because they foster that there.
Well,
And we're going to lose.
I had heard that was a concern, and on the survey and in just what's been
Right.
developed and not developed. And I think it's a point well taken. And I was telling the board members when I was here last Thursday, that definitely needs to be an interview question that comes up with these candidates, because one of the greatest challenges as a superintendent is juggling and making sure that all students are fostered, whether it's in the academic realm, which I consider the fine arts an academic realm also, because it all develops the mind and the person. So I told them that it is critical that when it comes time for interviews, they're going to have to really pick the brain of these candidates and ensure that they have a track record of fostering all areas. And yes, I know in our state, I know where athletics are, and I know the pressure I had on me as a superintendent to foster that athletics. But we also know that we have far more students, well, many students, and athletics are important, don't get me wrong. They develop a lot of students in a lot of good ways, but there are so many more areas where the money has to be juggled, and you've got to get somebody in here who's going to be able to juggle those resources and give equal as much, and that's in the eye of the beholder, trust me, that's in the eye of the beholder, but get somebody who's going to place value. And I'm not passing judgment on anybody who's been here in the past whatsoever. This is a challenge throughout our nation.
Right.
And I hear your voices based on what I've read and the concerns about that survey. But do keep in mind, now the survey is just, and I had nothing to do with it, nothing.
Just
It was
one.
a private firm, and I know they're looking for somewhat empirical data here. But that is just one snippet. There was another question not far from that one, if I saw correctly, that asked about, I didn't use these words, but juggling the resources, giving fair credence to everybody.
Well, I'll follow up really. I'm sorry. I'll follow up. Yeah, I think the other problem with it, there's a lot of leading in that survey, and so yes, maybe you do ask the question, but it's not very clear. But I guess maybe to my overall point, I think and I realize that what Hoover has done with their football program is fantastic. I'm not taking away that from all, but from my perspective as a parent, I wish the school board would care about everything else as much as they care about Hoover football. And we have to take everything else has to be up to that standard. I have friends that teach in Dallas, Texas. Katy High School in Houston, Plano East, Arcadia in California. All these schools are big schools, and they have fantastic football programs, and their fine arts are second to none. And it's not about just this one thing. It's about taking all of these things. And you can go beyond, we can go beyond fine arts, and we can say technology, we can say opportunities. Everything in this school system needs to be at that level. And if it's not at that level, as far as I'm concerned, that's unacceptable. I mean, we're all paying a lot of tax dollars to live here. Hey, Homewood has a fine arts center. Mountain Brook has a fine arts center. You go through all of these school systems. They all have these things, you know. And I think it's fantastic what Hoover has done with their football program. I think it's great to see our community get the accolades that it gets for that. But it's time for everything else to kind of step up to that. And it's time for the school board to kind of take that and go, hey, whatever it takes. Whether that's, you know, I don't know what that is, but we have to invest in the other things. So it's not just this one thing that we have.
Sure.
Our students have, like you said, we're fostering fine arts students, theater, drama, all these things. So.
Well, I hear you, and I definitely will make sure the board gets that information. I think they have it based on my conversations with them. I think they're hearing you. But I feel like the data will even bear this out more. I feel sure it'll be part of the report when I come back here on the 10th. Based on what I'm hearing and reading. And I think your points are very well taken. And trust me, getting somebody who's going to juggle and see that all parts of your programs, that they're all important and that they are all given priority. And trust me, as a superintendent, it's tricky. But the pressures, you know, keeping that focus on what's best for students. And I truly feel like in the heart and minds of your board members, they do have your students first and foremost in mind, but somebody will need to come in here and there'll need to be some action. All this needs to be part of a strategic plan. Somebody coming in here and who will get with the stakeholders and develop a strategic plan where there can be emphasis on all areas and take them, because you have the resources here. You definitely have the resources here. To be the best in all areas. And in many areas you already are the best, but I hear what you're saying, I do, and I understand your frustration. I truly do. Yes, I haven't heard from you.
I second, third, and fourth what he
Yes.
said.
Yes.
Okay. One of the things that I was so pleasantly surprised when I came in, you actually are looking for us to put in our own words, our own priorities. Okay.
Please do.
This is what was missing from the online survey.
Yeah, and that's quantitative. I'm explaining to them. That's a numerical based. This one is qualitative, where it's open-ended, and I do want to hear from you. And then it'll all be put together in these reports. I even want you to go so far. You weren't in here to hear me say this, but I want you to go so far. If you know of somebody you want me to check out as a candidate, I want you to put that name on there, on the back, or somewhere. On the back if you filled up the front. If there's somebody who you think is probably going to be a contender and you just don't think that they are going to serve your district well, I want you to put that on there. But now make sure I know who's you're for and who you really don't want. That sounds unprofessional, but I'm telling you, I don't want to take up, my colleagues and I, don't want to take up one of those 5 slots with somebody who a number of people believe this would not be right for this situation. So I want you to get down to that level on that paper. That's how much I want to hear from you on that.
I really thank you.
And no names. Now, I would not be so unprofessional to get up on the 10th and say, and they said they don't want this person. But that information will privately go to the board. If needs be, sometimes it just goes to my colleagues and I when we screen. I have to use my professional discretion on that. Yes, ma'am.
I apologize because I did miss the first 15 minutes. I don't know what the format of this meeting is. I know it means it was.
So that's okay. Go ahead, and I'll kind of start over in a little bit.
Well, you know, in looking at this and echoing what he said, I think there's something that I know has been one of my longstanding platforms is we really don't do enough for the kids who are struggling in this district. And I'm not talking about the kids who are, you know, in wheelchairs and nonverbal. I'm talking about kids who move in from other systems. I've written here a near hatred of students living in apartments in this district. We resent them, the board resents them. They've made it very clear. And through all of what they say, over and over again of how much they resent them, even going so far as trying to eliminate buses a couple of years ago. So I think that that has to be, we can't forget that part of it. Everybody wants to talk about how great Hoover is and how wonderful we are, and I'm all for that. I've lived here my entire life. But this idea that we can't just focus on football or fine arts or those kids who are going to go get scholarships to Harvard, we are seen by many families as the way forward. And they move here for those opportunities to make sure that their children are prepared. And many of them are transient. You know, maybe maybe family lives in Tarrant or Pinson or, Birmingham or unincorporated Jefferson County, so they move here and they become residents of Hoover. But there is this mentality, and it is pervasive from the top down to kindergarten teachers, that these kids are moving through, we're not going to spend the time with them, we don't have programs in place for kids to really shore them up. We think, well, if we don't get to test them, they'll be gone by the end of the year, and if we don't get to test them, well, we're not going to put the effort into them. And I'm not embellishing. I mean, these are sentiments, and I don't know how to make sure we get that conveyed, that the next superintendent is going to have to lead us past that attitude, and it's going to have to come from the top down, because it's at every level.
Well, if I hear that on a lot of papers today, that will be one of the themes that come out that I would be articulating on the 10th when I present.
Well, my fear, though, is that people who live in apartments aren't here. Mom is. But, their voices rarely get to be heard, because typically families who choose multi-unit housing are busy people. And that's one of the reasons they don't want to yawn.
Sure,
right?
I understand.
They don't want to have to
Right.
worry about getting the utility guys out there. So those are lifestyle choices. So I'm not sure we're going to hear from a lot of them. That's why I'm not representing them.
But you're advocating for them.
I am,
And it's
because-
about keeping the public in public education.
Exactly. And I think
And
Monica's
for
doing
all,
better.
as I always say, all God's children. Because really that's who we're here to serve. All of the children. And your arm's gonna drop off back there, I know.
Sorry. I'll
Thank
stand
you
up.
for your comment.
I'm sorry I missed a few minutes
It's
in the
okay.
beginning. I'm not really certain. I believe you said a few times that you were a superintendent. Can you share with me where?
Florence, Alabama.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just an observation of the meeting, and I will echo a lot of what was said or what I've heard said. One thing, just feedback, it would be nice perhaps if the board was here, or some of them were here to hear what the community has to say.
We told them not to come.
They
Okay.
chose
And I'll
not
tell you
to.
why, because we were
okay.
afraid you'd be afraid to say what you wanted to say.
Perhaps.
If they were here.
I mean, I don't know. You
But they don't
probably
show up
haven't attended our board
anywhere.
meetings much.
Pretty much. They don't show up. We tell them not to show up for any of these in any district. That's not unique here. But the engagement meetings, no, we tell them to stay away.
Okay,
They'll
so
get the report
it's
later.
being
So
recorded, so that's just
I'm covering
feedback.
for them because they're doing what we told them to do.
Okay, very
Go
good.
ahead.
Well, feedback for them or you, I do this for a living, I think it'd be good if they were here, because I think open communication is gonna be important. The other question I have the utmost respect for Dr. Reese. I'm from Enterprise. He was the superintendent there. I have family members that work directly for him. And he and his daughter and I went to school together. Is he part of this search effort? Because I don't know very many people in the state. I certainly don't know anyone who could rival the football program in Hoover, nor do we need a new football coach. So I really don't see the relevance in that question myself either. I think there are things, though, certainly that he could bring to this search. I just wonder, for my own peace of mind, I'd like to think that he's being involved somehow. But can you share that with us?
Sure, yeah, I can share that with you. He's not a consultant, as I am. There are four of us, and I mentioned that a little bit earlier. He's not on that level. I mean, not that. He's part-time doing interim, but he's not a consultant with ASB. However, I have met with him once the day I came in, and I will be talking with him as well as other sitting superintendents who have a reputation for knowing and connecting with some of the finest people in the state, either assistant superintendents or superintendents, and we'll be tapping into them for suggestions. So he and I will be talking again, but he won't be sitting with us at the table when we screen. But that doesn't mean if we want information about somebody who lives down around Enterprise who's applied, that doesn't mean we won't pick up the phone and call him and say, can you tell us more about this guy or gal? So he's involved in that way. He's not one of the 4 consultants, but he will be involved. Plus, he's going to, at that point, have been in this district for a while to get a good sense of the culture, of the needs, of the strengths, et cetera. And he will be one for us to tap, and we do this a lot of places where there's either an interim or just someone, say, retiring or moving on. We tap into the current superintendent for suggestions. But again, the ultimate decision will rest with the board as to who the one of 5 is. But we do use sitting superintendents to help us with the screening process as needed.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Let me pick somebody who I've not, have you already asked a question? Okay, go ahead.
My name is Monica Dobbins. As Trish mentioned, I'm a resident of an apartment community here, so that's my perspective on how the board and how our previous superintendent dealt with families who live in apartment complexes for many reasons. A couple of my concerns about searching for a new superintendent. One, I'd like to know that the AASB is not just encouraging minority candidates to apply, but actively recruiting them. I think that more effort than usual will be necessary to locate specifically minority candidates, not just for the school system, but for our city, you know. And I also think that it would be great to have someone who has experience in a community with people of color, with low-income with low-income students, to know what their specific needs are. Oh, and I have one more. What was it? Well, that's a good start.
And make sure you write these.
I
Now,
am
you are
writing them
telling me
down
these
for
things,
sure.
but I want to make sure you're writing them on your paper also,
For
okay?
For sure.
Okay.
Because I'm gonna add the bit about apartments to all y'all's papers when you walk out.
No cheating.
Yeah.
Thank you, and that's most everywhere anymore, where we need to all be more mindful and more active of getting diverse candidate pools. And the same thing with teachers, the school leaders. Just needs to be a continuous pursuit anymore, because those children need to feel represented and heard and understood. Very important. Have I already? Okay, go.
Did I understand you to say that the board discussions would be made public?
They're in open meetings by law, yes.
Okay, and are those going to be posted online somewhere, or do we have to be here to see them?
If they're
You mentioned the
meetings,
interviews would be videoed, but.
yeah, if they're meetings, then there'll be minutes. And I'm assuming your minutes are posted online. I didn't go on and look, but most minutes are there.
Not timely.
And then when it comes to the interviews, we encourage, I haven't confirmed that with anybody because we're not there yet, but we encourage that they are video recorded and posted on the websites, the school and the district, and sometimes the city, the mayor's office sometimes will post them too on their website, so that anybody who wants to see those interviews to be able to give feedback. It's not real convenient when you're a working parent and you have, kids are at home doing homework at night to get here. I don't know what time they'll schedule them for, that's not been decided, but generally it's in the evenings, these interviews. It's not real easy for people to get to these 5 nights in a row. So that's why we encourage them to put them online. And then we say, give people time to see them before you come back and have your discussions about your final candidates. It may be that after their discussions, they'll narrow the candidates down to 2, and they'll call them back for a second interview. Or like I said, they may go visit their districts. And we walk them through options all the way. The School Board Association stays with the board all the way to the point that the contract is signed. And then they even have, as part of this package, they have one session where my supervisor will facilitate a goal-setting session with the new superintendent and the board, even after the person's selected. So once I turn over the names, we don't just drop out of the picture, because they have oftentimes questions. As the candidates, we're receiving questions from the candidates as we do from the board as we go through this process. And I'm going to give you my email address right now because it is not a secret. And if you need to ask me a question, please don't hesitate to email me. I'll get back with you as quickly as I can. If I don't know the answer, I'll find out. And I'll tell you what I can. Some things, like if you say, well, who's applied so far? I'm going to say, sorry, I can't tell you. I can't tell you that. So my email address is L, then it's BEHREN, that's an N like in Nancy, then a D is in David, S is in Sam, L Behrens, that's my last name, I know, it's crazy, L Behrens, and at Comcast.net. So if there's a point along the way, if something's not clear in the media, and I'll be working closely with the media throughout this process, email me and I'll tell you what I know at that point. You know, this is not a, this process is not real puzzling. It shouldn't be. If it is, then I'm not doing something right. And like I said, it's very transparent, and the board is going to need input once these names are released. And for those of you who came in late, I don't have a clue who will be in this pool because we haven't even posted the job yet. So sometimes I'll be walking around and go, how many people have applied? And I'm like, we haven't posted yet. But they know that we're working with the, you know, the school board on the project. So, okay, I know I have another group that will be coming in, but is there anything you did not get to write down for me that you would like to? And by the way, don't forget to circle what category you're in, because when I report based on category. And I know sometimes you fall into two, you're a community member and you're a parent, but whatever you are here as right now, circle that. Anything you didn't get an opportunity to, yes?
One thing I want to mention, and I think that just to make you aware, I know that you don't live in Newburgh. Our last superintendent search, what I feel it in this room is the community gave a lot of input that was ultimately discounted by the board, because the community made it loud and clear we wanted an educator, and Ada Revolt, who at that time had a very powerful position between the city and the board, said, no, we want a businessman. And so the lack of trust, if you feel a little bit of a, it's like,
Well,
we went
that's
through this
common.
before, but I mean,
Yeah. Well,
sometimes
thank
the
you.
community really feels like we have a voice, but some of us old timers are like, I trust you, I trust the ASB, but
Sure.
as Sally Howell made it very clear to the board in the training session, it's still up to the board to make the decision.
Yes.
So, you know, what you tell them about what
Yeah.
all we have said is very important, but we do recognize it's still their decision, and we don't elect our board, so there's not really an accountability to do
Gotcha.
what the community wants.
Yeah, I
Just
hear
want to
you.
put that bug in your ear.
Yeah,
as you move
yeah,
forward
thanks
through
for
the
saying
day.
that. That's helpful. And, you know, a lot of times this is a scary process because it's the fear of the unknown, and it helps when people come and hear how the process is going to work and who's facilitating all this. But what I found, the first couple of searches that I facilitated, once I gave them all the data that I'll be sharing on the 10th, I didn't tell them how to use that data as they continued on through the process. And I found that it was just kind of sitting there, you know, as studies do on a shelf. And so I learned in a hurry that I'll be working with them how to use this data, and you'll hear me say that on the 10th if you're here, because it's very important that they develop interview questions around those, I'm going to call them sore spots. Every district has them, those hot spots. Let's say hot spots sounds a little nicer. So whatever the hot spots are of the district, and they want to make sure they get somebody in here who's going to tend to those. Questions in the interview, and we help them. We don't develop the questions, but we give them pools and we give them pointers. Questions need to be revolved around some of those hot spots to see how these people are going to stack up against each other regarding, say, you know, the fine arts being important as athletics or whatever it is. Also, I explained to the board how the results I take with me to Montgomery the day when we sit, my colleagues and I will sit down there as long as it takes. If it's overnight, it's overnight. When we're screening applicants, and we look at these results because we have to match what we're getting from these surveys, what you're telling us, what we're hearing, we have to match that with these candidates as we find candidates. So it is a working document, but I've learned that if I don't teach people how to use it as a working document, it wasn't becoming one. So that I will do the very same thing here, just because it's the only way that, I mean, otherwise we're wasting my time, your time, and everybody else's time. So
There are a lot of us who feel that our city council and mayor are not adequately supporting the schools. And we feel we either need someone who can either convince them to do more for the schools. We do have an election in 2016, and there are many of us who feel that if the council and Mayor Ivy are not going to come around and adequately support the schools, then we're going to work diligently to replace the council and the mayor, because they've been flat funding the school at $2 million for the last few years, and we just feel that they can do much more for the schools. For example, the Fine Arts Center. That can happen if the city council would simply provide the funds for that. We are richly blessed in from whom much is given, much is expected. I personally think we can pay an extra penny sales tax, which would raise $20 million for the schools. They are strongly, vehemently opposed to any such thing. Mayor Ivy has told me no tax increase. Even the governor has said in this state we need some tax increase. I think we could manage that in Hoover. The schools are our most valuable resource, and so I would hope that any superintendent would be quite upfront and frank with the council and let them know that they must support the school.
So what I'm hearing you say is whoever comes into this job really needs to work closely with the city leaders on behalf of the school district. Now, again, if that is something that shows up as a common theme, I'm not putting words in everybody's mouth, I'm just saying what I'm hearing you say.
Outside the political realm, and that's what's happened here lately.
And be strong enough to stand
Right.
up to those that are seated in power publicly and those that pull the strings on
I mean,
those that are.
I have gone to
public
city,
faces.
I've gone to city council meetings advocating more funding for the schools, and their answer is, and I have no way to fight, it's like swinging the ghost. They said, the superintendent has never asked for more money. You can't fail like that, you can't let the kids down like that.
The prior superintendent, didn't she get fired for asking for
Yes.
more?
Well,
money? Does the, or was.
She went a little overboard, but yes, yeah, she went a
So,
little.
So somewhere there's a happy medium, apparently.
I was at the council meeting last night. In fact, the audio will be online later today. Not one word, not one single word was spoken by Mayor Ivy or the council about the survey or about this meeting tonight. I didn't say anything because I was waiting to hear them say something. They said absolutely nothing.
And can I ask, in your experience, because I will echo this sentiment, in most public school districts, there is some bridge between the board and the mayor's office or the city council. It's my understanding from the mayor's office that they can't have anything to do with this. But I find that to be difficult because I've seen it work that way. There just doesn't seem to be a lot of communication. And obviously, if Hoover City Schools don't do well and succeed, the city of Hoover doesn't do well and succeed. So when the mayor, specifically gives me that information, then I have a sincere problem with it, and I have a misunderstanding in terms of what the city council's responsibility happens to be to Hoover City Schools. Do you know, based
Well,
on your
I
experience?
can speak from my personal experience that all city leaders work together for the good of the whole.
Yeah.
Now, what, I don't know the there's a possible interpretation of that is, it's true that the mayor and city council are not to be micromanaging the day-to-day operations of a school district.
Right.
And sometimes they're they don't want to be accused of that, and they're so hands-off that, because they don't want to be perceived as trying to run the school district. They don't want to be perceived as saying, you know, this is my cousin, I want him or her to be the teacher in your school. You know, and that's appropriate for them to step back from that. That is very appropriate. But everybody, everybody in this community has a role of working together for the good of the community just by being a community member,
Right.
whatever your role. So, you know, city
they do
leaders,
appoint the
it's not
board
uncommon for city
here.
leaders to all work together, and I consider superintendents, mayors, county commissioners in our area, city council people working together, and there were different things that would come up that we'd be working with the different ones together. So the answer is yes, it's okay to work together. is it okay for somebody other than the board, or even a board's not to micromanage, for them to take part in the day-to-day operations? That answer is no, so.
But they would remove the board, correct? I mean, because they appoint the board,
No.
therefore they have to have some
No.
involvement. And this idea of the hands-off
No.
Yeah.
to the extreme
Yeah.
is,
And maybe a new superintendent coming in can sit with these people and clarify what the roles are, because it sounds like there might be some misperception about what the roles, or some angst about what the roles and responsibilities are. But a superintendent, it would not be uncommon for a superintendent to meet with city leaders and for them to define and make sure it's in accordance with the law also, as to what the roles and responsibilities are in terms of the superintendent running the city, or having a role in the say of the city, and the city having a say or a role in the school system. But partnerships, there's great strength in partnerships, and superintendents must build partnerships with many, many people in a community for everything to run like a well-oiled machine, from my personal experience. Yes, let me check my time real quick, but I don't see anybody out there right now, so.
And there
We're good, we're good. Yes.
In August of 2008, I attended my first budget hearing of the school board.
Mhm.
And we had an approximately $20 million deficit budget. And I asked, as you can hear, I'm not from Alabama, okay? I'm an exile from New Jersey. I said, don't you use encumbrance accounting? And the answer that was given was, no, the budget is merely a planning process. Well, if you don't have rigor in your budgeting, how can you control your finances? And we have had deficit budgets each year. And that, I think, is the point has been made that the city council and the mayor are not looking to support the school system financially. It could well be that they're waiting for the school system to get better control of their finances, so that it would be money well spent, as opposed to just, gee, let's do some more edifice complex stuff.
And it could be, I don't know all the intricacies of the, conversations between the two, and I'm not gonna pretend to, and I don't need to speculate. But that could be, that could be a possibility. But it sounds like conversations will need to take place with the new person and the people who are seated in leadership positions. Yes.
I would just say to what the gentleman to my left said, and kind of what everybody else said, I think when you get to the crux of the biscuit, a lot of the issues that we brought up, fine arts, busing, apartments, a lot of these issues, when you really get down to it, it's the city council and the school board not working together. I think when you really get down to it and you really sort it out, a lot of those issues are because, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand's doing. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. They're not communicating and working together, like you said, for the betterment of the community. It's just not happening. So I think a lot of what everyone has said today, you could really boil it down to that point, and really look at that and say,
yeah, that's good to know. See, I can make recommendations. In fact, usually after a new superintendent seated or has been selected, by that time, I've heard all these different things in a community, and I feel like it's my responsibility, if it's not my job description, but to give a heads up to this new person coming in and say, you need to know there's a lot of concern in this community about this, about this, about this. One of my suggestions, just based on what I'm hearing you say today, will be to the superintendent, have quarterly luncheons. And I know when we did this, it was great. We had a quarterly luncheon with our mayor, city council. If I had been out in the county, it would have been with the commissioners. And they were school lunches, and they were good. But it was school lunch. It was in a gymnasium, and then we shared the highlights of what was going on for that quarter. And they got to ask questions. Sometimes we did tours, like of a new facility or whatever, so they could see. And oftentimes the response was, that has been so helpful for us, because they're busy people too, and it was just a time for everybody to stop, pause, focus, concentrate, hear each other, and look and see what's going on.
And that has been suggested every year from 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8. After 2009, I gave up because the council.
There has been one time that the city council and the mayor and the Board of Education got together publicly at Michael's Restaurant, and I was one of 2 members of the public who was there together with a reporter from the Birmingham News. That's the only time that I know that anything like that has taken place.
Birmingham just had a meeting with their Board of Education, the City Council, and the Birmingham City, the Business Council, the business leaders, all together in a luncheon to discuss the schools and the needs of the schools.
Because we're all interconnected. We're all interconnected. And now we're interconnected with people halfway around the world, not just our own community.
I hear a lot of political things going on, but for me, it translates all the way back down to the classroom. I tell everyone, my school system is as good as my daughter's teacher. Because if she's got a good teacher in her classroom, I love Hoover School System.
Where the rubber meets the road, isn't it?
Exactly. And I've been here for 20 years. I've come across some excellent teachers. I've come across some that does not need to be here. But that's not addressed in the school, in the individual schools. And I think that's something that we need to address here in Hoover as well.
Accountability.
Accountability, staffing, administration.
Right.
Well, you all have had, I mean, all these are very good points. I must say, they're not things that I haven't heard in some other districts also. I don't want you to feel like you're the Lone Rangers. But on the other hand, everything I'm hearing you say is fixable, it's doable. And I am not one to, having been a superintendent in consolidated rival high schools and had to sell a couple of schools, I've had more rotten tomatoes thrown at me during my days than you can imagine. I'm not afraid to tell anybody anything, so I am not one bit hesitant to share with the board. It won't all be out here in the setting when I'm sharing next week, because I have a format that I follow there to share what I already told you I'd be sharing. But to share your questions, your concerns. But even more importantly, when the new person is selected, or as we're screening for a new person, even before that, for me to keep in mind what you're telling me, and for me to have a conversation with the new superintendent, maybe more than one, about some of these issues that you brought up, because they are very doable. And some of the things that you're talking about, conversations, having lunch together, we're not talking huge amounts of money. Now, maybe building a fine arts center, that's going to get into some construction costs, et cetera. But some of these things you're saying are not resource heavy, other than some time and some attention, to some very important, I'm not even going to call them details, but to some very important items. So you've had very good ideas. It's been fun meeting with you, and I'll probably see some of you again. I'll be meeting with different groups today. I have teachers coming in. I have support personnel. There'll be another community group tonight. I have some government officials I'll be meeting with. And so anyway, I'm sure by the end of the day, I'm going to have a real good picture why this day is so valuable to me as a consultant. Yes?
Can you just verify your email address again?
Sure. It's lbehrrends@comcast.net.
Okay, thank you.
Now listen, if you did not get a form to fill out, I need you to do that. It can be brief, bullets fine, circle what group. Some of you came in and I didn't give you a form. Fill one of these out for me before you go. For those of you who have your form filled out, you may put them in that folder or this folder, so there's not a bottleneck. And you're welcome to stay and chat, or you're welcome to go. I realize my next group isn't until 1, so I don't have a group right now. I have a group of 1. Thank you so much for taking time out.
Yeah.
This is by far the biggest community group I've ever had, and I'm so excited about that. We think it'll be